Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to present the work done by many of my undergraduate students and 2 high school students, Shreyas and Aayush. We are going to talk about water quality evaluation, chemical analysis, and what we find and how it impacts the several natural cycles of nitrogen and oxygen. So our project mainly focuses on getting water supply, water sample from tap water and other water resources around us, and do simple chemical analysis. And our main research questions are, if we do find, we are going to look into the nitrogen levels in water supply. Although we did extend the studies to phosphorus, however, today in this poster, I'm just presenting the nitrogen content. So we wanted to see how the nitrogen content measured in the laboratory by chemical analysis compares with the nitrogen content reported by the Suffolk County Water Authority. And also, we wanted to see how it compares with the allowable levels by the Environmental Protection Agency for US. Also we know that already it is known that the increased nitrogen level would affect the other biological cycles of nitrogen, oxygen and carbon cycle. And we used a very simple chemical analysis in order to measure the nitrogen content in the form of nitrates and ammonia. So the experimental chemical analysis actually involved using conductivity measurements. We simply asked the undergraduate students to bring in the water supply. They got 2 to 3 samples, the tap water as well as the pond water, and some students even got the runoff from their lawns. And we measured the ammonium and the nitrate contents, and we actually did find an alarmingly high level, and so that is our challenge, how it affects the rest of the biological cycle. And Long Island being a sole source aquifer, which means that we don't have any other water supply than the groundwater which is available and supplies the entire island. In order to tell us about the experimental results, I have my high school students, Aayush and Shreyas. They will present the experimental results from the chemical analysis. Aayush?
Okay, thank you. So as we see in these 2 pictures, if we focus on the picture on the left, we can see that these red dots represent the concentration of the nitrate in our water, in the waters collected in the experiment. So we can see that the nitrogen has alarmingly high dots, which means it's alarmingly high in concentration. And we found that the concentration of eastern Long Island section, so over here, was close to 60 parts per million. And the recommended level by the US EPA is only 10 parts per million. So we can see that this is an alarmingly high amount of nitrate. Now focusing on the graph on the right, we can see that there's less dots of ammonia, but still the effects of ammonia are still deadly, and we'll talk about that later with the high concentration. And the recommended level for ammonia is 0.25 to 32.5 parts per million, while the National Academy Sciences of European Nation have adopted 0.5 ppm. So the students before surveyed that younger adults recognize the root cause of increased nitrogen levels as fertilizer runoff and cesspools and septic issues. Now focusing on the nitrogen cycle. Now the nitrogen cycle is a cycle of biological things where nitrogen flows through living and non-living things. Now the nitrogen is also known in our drinking water. So humans have been known to cause impacts in the nitrogen cycle by adding nitrates and other nitrogen compounds via fertilizer runoff, industry uses, and burning of fossil fuels in the environment. And we can see in this diagram, the volcano is spewing out nitrogen gas and it's ruining the whole cycle. And this imbalance of nitrogen causes pH levels to increase, and that results in the killing of various aquatic life. As well as nitrogen, one of the more compounds is nitrous oxide, which is a potent greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. And another one is also nitric oxide. These are both really dangerous and can have devastating effects when in the nitrogen cycle. Now, excess nitrogen in our tap water interferes with the ability of red blood cells to transport oxygen, called hemoglobinemia. And this is when an infant or a young child experiences difficulty in breathing, which can have obviously devastating effects. Now, excess ammonia, as we looked in the graph below with the red dots, they can lead to toxins in the liver and leading to dizziness and even death. So excess nitrogen causes also the overstimulation of many aquatic plants such as algae and can impact other cycles such as the oxygen and the carbon cycle. Now my partner Shreyas Prakash will be talking about the oxygen cycle and its impacts.
Thank you, Aayush. The high amounts of nitrates present in the water has bad impacts on the oxygen cycle. Elevated levels of nitrates promote algae growth, as shown by the equation below. The nitrates are needed to make up the algae. As the algae dies and sinks, decomposers use large amounts of dissolved oxygen, and the water oxygen content sharply decreases in a process called eutrophication. This makes the water unsuitable for marine life. Cultural eutrophication leads to blooms of blue-green algae, contaminated water sources, and loss of biodiversity, and it can degrade recreational opportunities. Algae blooms can also prevent sunlight penetration, as shown in this picture. And it will make it harder for subsurface plants to get light, to carry out photosynthesis, and produce oxygen for the ecosystem. This is especially a problem in stratified waters, such as the Long Island Sound. Stratified water occurs when there are differences in temperature and salinity that result in layers of water. Large amounts of algae can result in anoxia or hypoxia, and that's when there's less oxygen in the water, and anoxia is when there's no oxygen, which creates stressful conditions for aquatic life. In fact, hypoxia has resulted in significant losses of fish and shellfish in the Long Island Sound. Some algae has toxins, and these toxins can cause skin irritation or gastrointestinal problems, and they can even paralyze the human nervous system. But in dogs and likely other animals, it can be fatal. There have been reports of dogs dying due to blue-green algae in several states. This is becoming more of an issue because in recent years, there has been an increase in toxic algal blooms observed worldwide, and even in the lakes of New York. This is why it's important that we keep an eye on the nitrate levels in the water, and Dr. Sambasivan will continue on this.
Thank you, Shreyas, for educating us with the serious effect on the oxygen cycle caused by the nitrates excess. As you can see that our data did suggest that we had increased levels of nitrates and ammonia in our water system. So we obviously want to extend this research to other sources of drinking water, etc. We want to definitely measure the dissolved oxygen content, as we saw that it affects the oxygen cycle, and also extend testing for cyanobacteria, which is caused by the algae bloom and has serious effect and fatal effect to the marine life. So one of the challenges we have in this project is to educate the local public about all these serious effects that we are doing, human impacts to the water system around us, and we need policies to control the release of nitrogen in the form of nitrogenous fertilizers, and perhaps suggest using more use of the organic fertilizers. So I want to acknowledge the support, multiple grants involved in this project, mainly Hemsley Charitable Trust and several NSF grants, and the National Institute of Health grants, which was actually co-PI'd by Dr. Candice Foley and Naina Lenhart. We are extremely thankful to slew of undergraduate students who worked on this project and painstakingly plotted all these graphs on the map of Long Island, and did the analysis and compared with the Suffolk County water data. Thank you very much for your attention.